Hello and welcome back to the Private Client Podcast. For those tuning in for the first time, I'm Charlie Shammy. I'm an independent financial advisor at Glarms IFA and a co-founder of the Private Client Network. We are on a mission to bring together different private client professionals so we can all improve the service to our clients and grow our respective businesses. Today, I'm delighted to be speaking to the wonderful Alison Hawes. Alison has had a long career in family law across 3 top-tier law firms, serving as partner at TLT and Irwin Mitchell, the former of which she was also head of their family team. Alison is now a consultant at Burgess Salmon with a specialism in complex financial cases. Alison, thank you so much for joining us.
Charlie, it's a pleasure. Good morning.
Before we dive into your career, can you tell me, what do family lawyers do?
Ooh, what don't family lawyers do? We generally get involved with individuals at the beginning of the breakdown of a relationship, whether that's a marriage or cohabitation or issues about children. We give legal advice, we gather information, we come up with strategies, and we support, advise, and more often than not negotiate settlements. But family lawyers, when all is said and done, are actually litigators. So we always have a court timetable in the back of our minds, however nicely we negotiate, and if necessary, we go to court.
How often is that where most cases end up, or can most be solved?
No, absolutely not. No,
court?
a very significant majority settle. I mean, you do get some solicitors who hold themselves out as Rottweilers and issue proceedings very quickly as a tactic. But it's very expensive. It's pretty stressful for the clients. And frankly, you give away your power because a judge is then imposing a solution that neither of you might like. I reckon that I settle around 90% of the cases that I deal with.
Oh, wow. So that's
Yeah.
presumably the
court is
better
rare.
option if you can.
Yeah, going to court is rare. It's a last resort. Sometimes you have to. You have no choice because somebody's not telling you what's going on, or somebody's got wholly unreasonable expectations. Very rarely there's a point of legal principle that you need a judge to opine on. But frankly, most cases are, if I may say so, not rocket science. There's a set of legal principles, a set of facts, and yeah, because there's quite a broad discretion in this country, you can say to your client, well, you could end up here, you could end up here. Anywhere in between is what a judge would do. So let's start talking. Let's have a look at narrowing that gap and get you somewhere on that spectrum, and let's do a deal. So much more cost effective.
Yeah, it makes sense. Is there, how accurately can you predict where any given judge might fall on a split of assets? Is it relatively predictable question.
Or the more experience you have, the easier it is. Yeah. And sometimes I'm quite frustrated that I will see a client for a first meeting and I will know pretty much then that this is how it's going to, maybe bar a bit of capital gains tax calculations or, getting some shares valued. But I generally have a pretty good feel. And then the solicitor for the other side comes along and starts asking ridiculous questions about inside leg measurements. And 9 months later, it ends up where you thought it would be on day one. Judges don't often get it wrong. It's still a bit unpredictable, however. There are judges who haven't got time to read the papers. There are judges with regional kind of divergences, for example, historically, and possibly still true. You used to say that if you were acting for a high earner, you wouldn't issue in London because they were so used to giving out maintenance orders for wives there and dealing with kind of big bankers' bonuses that they were fairly free to do so. Whereas, again, anecdotally, judges in Wales are very mean and very often order clean breaks with no spousal maintenance.
Oh, wow. So a lot of variation then.
A lot of variation. I mean, the rules are different now and the cases are allocated on the basis of postcode. But in the old days, I used to issue some cases in Bath in the run up to Christmas because it's a brilliant place to do Christmas shopping.
It makes sense. It can be a little hectic.
For the same reason, frankly. Yeah. Yeah. Although the parking's good at Gloucester. But yeah. But that random, choosing which court has rather disappeared.
Yeah, I suppose that. Well, yeah, there's a lot of playing of the system, I suppose you could do under that system.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So your LinkedIn profile says you're a consultant at Burgess Salmon, but I know a little bit about what you do, and I feel that doesn't begin to cover the breadth of your role. What is your responsibilities there?
Um, I suppose the same as any very senior lawyer in a top 50 law firm. I'm an officer of the senior courts, like all solicitors are. I'm responsible for business development, maintaining my practice, networking, responsible for mentoring, supporting, and training juniors. And yeah, I'm very interested in risk and was a risk partner at both my previous firms. And that is kind of good practice. How can we do this better? And apart from that, my role is to bring in work and then allocate it and yeah, bring up the juniors. One of the greatest pleasures over my 30-year legal career has been building teams of juniors. Taking on trainees, spotting something, working with them, developing them. And again, it gives me enormous pride when a partner in another firm says, I learned this from you. A
Yeah, I
very,
can
very,
imagine
very long
that's a really
time ago. It makes me feel old, but it's pretty fulfilling that somebody
no,
says
it,
you
it it is
inspired
a
me.
really nice part of any job, I think, bringing people
Yeah,
along. Also sort of
yeah.
reminds you how much you know. If you ever doubt it, it's when you get the questions of
But also
juniors.
how jaded you can be. I mean, I did a presentation to, I don't know what year they were. It was part of our Bright Spark scheme where kids come in from local schools and just spend the day looking around. And apparently some of them said, oh, we like the idea of family law. They must have watched a telly program or something. So I went and gave an impromptu talk to about 12 of them, and they were delightful. I mean, they had such good questions and they were so fired up by it. I also do a lot of interviewing actually for our apprentice scheme and our training contract schemes. Did a couple yesterday and met some really interesting people, somebody with a first class honours degree in zoology, um, who, yeah, we could have talked about ant poop all day, but we didn't have very long for the interview. We had to, go through the standard questions really. But yeah.
It's an, I mean, law is always is it's notoriously difficult to get into, and lots of people study law, they'll do their LPC and
Mhm.
not get a training contract. How does how does it work at Burgess Salmon in terms of by the time they get to you, presumably they've been filtered down by HR already, so you're getting a sort of
We
shortlisted
call it the
candidate.
people team actually these days, Charlie, if you don't mind.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah,
it's
the
very true.
people team. Yeah, yeah, because they deal like with people. Um, Actually, I have to be honest with you, I'm not involved on the technical side, but
Mm.
you're absolutely right. The candidates that I'm asked to interview are superb. They are the creme de la creme. They've got more impressive CVs than I will ever have. And if I was applying for a training contract now, I would not get one. Um, high academics, Russell Group universities, most of them have established and run orphanages in Ukraine. Most of them have cycled, to John O'Groats and back and earned huge amounts for charity. And most of them speak 4 languages. And I would not have a prayer, quite frankly.
So, I mean,
It's very competitive.
I had a very similar experience at the investment bank I used to work for. Just before I left, I was on the grad recruitment panel, and similarly, the CVs they were very much shortlisted by the time they got to the interview stage, which was when
Yes,
I was
yeah.
involved, and they were phenomenal. And I very much had
Mm.
similar thoughts. But how? I mean, in which case, if they're all so good, how? What are you looking for? How do you decide if there's
I think you
someone?
should always recruit people who frighten you slightly. And I've lived by that. I mean, I really enjoy people who are challenging and fierce. At Burgess Salmon, we look for exceptional talent because that's a given. We are clever lawyers. That's one of the first things that I've always thought about Burgess Salmon. It has extremely clever lawyers, but also somebody who fits the culture. And that genuinely is somebody who is friendly and accessible and not hung up on hierarchy. One of the interesting things about Burgess Salmon is the cars the partners drive. They are pretty damn ordinary, actually,
Oh
and
no, I
that's
was
quite
expecting an
appealing.
anecdote about high performance vehicles.
Well, I have worked at other firms, as you know, and at one of those, I remember going to the headquarters in Sheffield, and the car park outside the main entrance to the headquarters was absolutely stacked with Maseratis and, Ferraris. Beautiful, beautiful. I love good cars, and enjoy driving them. And I assumed that this was clients, but no, this was partners. And actually, yeah, a bit flashy, not really.
Mm.
Don't
No,
know.
yeah, I
Yeah.
understand, but it's a
They did
difficult
in
thing to
fact
pull
change their
out.
policy and made it client parking whilst I was there, which I heartily approved of.
Yeah, that's true. It's difficult though. So if you're interviewing people with solid academics,
Yep.
great extracurriculars, and then
Yep.
you've got to try and figure out the cultural fit, which is much harder to sort of, I guess, put into your recruitment brief or make it as objective as maybe some other criteria, which are academics based, and it's quite
Indeed,
easy to.
absolutely. You can tick boxes, can't you, and fulfill kind of graphs and curves or whatever. Yeah, I mean, most of the people who come to Burgess Salmon come for the culture. And as one of them said yesterday, it's quite difficult to discern culture from a website because every firm says we're very people friendly and we're accessible,
Yeah.
and we put our resources first and whatever. But actually, that's why they spend an entire day doing group exercises, Watson laser tests, um, all sorts, interviews, tasks, presentations. We ask them to write a short piece that then gets reviewed. So yeah, and also we run a vacation assessment scheme, a vacation scheme where they come and spend, a solid week or 2 weeks moving between teams and doing actual work. And you can learn a
Yes.
lot about them then, a lot.
So you get
Yeah.
to see them outside of the, because interviews can be quite pressured. I mean,
Yeah,
you can tell
absolutely.
when
And
they're
you have
sort
to
of.
take that into account, don't you? I mean, I had 45 minutes or so to try and, yeah, get with it. I mean, I'm lucky. I enjoy talking to people and putting them at their ease as quickly as I can. You wouldn't be a decent family lawyer if you couldn't take the temperature in the room and realize who is holding out on you or nervous or not being quite themselves. So, tips and tricks to help people relax, and then you do start to see the genuine side, I think. Yeah, learn all
I
about
think
them.
it's completely the right approach. I mean, most people, most most jobs, you do not spend your entire day, stressed out of your mind and nervous. So why make the interview
Depends where you
process?
work, Charlie, but yeah, you
Well,
and I
yeah,
are
true.
lucky.
Yeah, I suppose it could be. So when you
But
were,
you're right, yeah, yeah. It's the people. You've got to get the people through. I mean, it's not an academic test. They've got university exams for that. They're coming to tell us about themselves, and yeah.
it'd be interesting thing to participate in. Did you,
Mm.
so did you always want to be a lawyer?
No, in fact, I was very anti. My father was insistent that when I went to university, I should read law, and because he was so insistent, I thought, nah, up yours. I'm going to do English and French. He was
I
furious.
saw that.
Yeah, absolutely furious. But
So
hey.
then what changed? What happened? What went wrong?
What went wrong? When I left university with this pretty useless English and French degree, I did not have a clue what to do. So my father sort of humped and paid for a secretarial course, which he said would tide me over maybe until I got married or something.
Yeah.
Um, and I then got some interviews, had a really good employment agent actually in London, after I'd done this short intensive course. And I had a fabulous range of interviews. And I chose the job that most attracted me because it looked fun and interesting with a record company and a music publishing company in Chelsea. Um, so I did that, and I was secretary to one of the directors for about 3 weeks. And then she went for lunch and never came back. So they promoted me, and I started running the music publishing company and doing a lot of copyright work, a lot of royalties, and quite a lot of business affairs, recording labels, contracts, things like that. Personal management of artists means negotiating contracts for them, television appearances, all those sorts of things. And I got really interested in the mechanics of the law. Um,
It's a
and
really,
although I
I must
enjoyed the
admit, it's a
music
really
business,
interesting part of the industry. I mean, if you ever wanted to make a subject come alive, I imagine that's a sort of end of the sector that would, I don't know, make it very real. And it's
yeah,
like,
exactly. Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. Because it's not just hand holding, and holding a packet of polos for Toya while she's on stage or something. It's
hmm,
understanding, the remuneration, the time limits, and all those sorts of things, juggling things, television contracts, film contracts. I did a lot of licensing music to film, which was fabulous and interesting, and got interested in licensing. And then thought, actually, there might be a job in this. Then, for personal reasons, I left London. Um, I'm not very proud of this, but the bloke I was living with got fed up with me, earning 6 times more than him and traveling the world.
Yeah.
and never being around. And he said, right, if you don't settle down and have kids, then I'm going. And I went, oh, okay. And we moved to Bristol, which is where we had friends and had met. And he said, right, okay, buy house, do it up, babies. And I was looking in the Evening Post one evening and I found this really interesting looking job for a criminal clerk
Mm.
for a firm in St. Paul's. And I thought, well, I could just do that while we sort the house out. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. Did that for a short while with a fabulous firm called Douglas and Partners that doesn't now exist. And thought, actually, I want to be a lawyer.
So is this before doing the LPC then?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
so this is
Yeah.
post university. You've done these couple of jobs
Post
with legal
university, had a
leanings.
job, traveling the world with Brian Ferry and stuff like that. That's not glamorous enough. So I end up in St. Paul's doing criminal clerking, which effectively means running Crown Court trials and getting up in the middle of the night to go to police stations to advise people who've been arrested for nicking Vauxhall Astras or
Okay.
worse.
They're really
Never
two
dull.
interesting sectors. I feel like I want to dive into the international stuff a little bit more. So was that with recording artists, and is that why you were
Yes,
traveling?
yes, yeah.
So and that sector's gone. I mean, with sort of the rise of social media influencers and reality
Mm,
TV stars, I think there's an awful lot of work, and I'm sure there was prior to sort of the rise of social media, but I think where it was just maybe TV celebrities and stuff in that, or musicians and singers, there's a
yeah,
whole other ream of these people that need help because they're dealing with advertisers and agents, and they need things in agreements and legal
absolutely.
protections and understand what they're
Absolutely,
signing up to.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Especially the roster of artists that we dealt with who had all sorts of other interests. I mean, I mentioned Toya Wilcox, for example,
Mm.
who started as a singer but is actually an extremely accomplished actress. And
Okay.
did a lot of film and television work and stage work, actually. She had a long-running gig at the Mermaid Theatre, I remember when I was working with her. So it was endlessly fascinating. And I dealt with the worldwide licensing. And the difficulty with that is that every January I would have to go to Cannes for 2 weeks.
Oh,
Um,
how did you manage it?
I know, for a international music publishing fair. It's just, I know, yeah, tricksy that was.
So you moved
Mm.
to Bristol.
Moved to
You
Bristol.
you you pivot, and now you're sort of getting exposure to criminal. Is it criminal law, presumably?
Criminal law, purely criminal law. Yeah, yeah.
And you're
Some
like,
excellent people and a high quality criminal representation firm. And just fascinated by the whole court process, really, how it all fits together. Meeting barristers, preparing cases for court, doing some of my own advocacy at a limited level, bail applications, that sort of thing. And I thought, hey, this is stimulating. This is fun.
and then you're like, right, I have to go into law, and you
I went
did.
back to college for 2 years, absolutely.
That
Yeah.
must have been really hard after having a couple of really quite interesting jobs. Was it hard going back and studying?
I loved it. I
Oh,
absolutely
great.
loved it. I think because I wanted to do it, it just all slotted together. And I think there were a couple of mature people on the course, and we just threw ourselves into it. Yeah,
I could see that because I mean, then suddenly studying contract law, it's all so real.
yeah, absolutely. And taught and everything. I loved it. I really did. And I didn't tell my father I did. I loved it, obviously, but I bitterly regretted not doing a law degree, I tell you. Well, not really, because I mean, I had fun. But you know what university is like the first time round.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
occupy Senate, you don't go to lectures, you live in a crappy house off campus somewhere. And yeah, there was a rat that came up through the loo, I remember.
Wow.
So actually, second time around, it was a luxury because I wanted to be there and we just worked really hard.
Well, I suppose you then get the privilege of, because once you've worked, you realize actually sort of full-time studying is actually quite nice,
Exactly.
by
Yeah. And there
comparison.
were some kids, bless them, straight from university doing the postgrad conversion who hadn't lived,
Yeah.
and weren't as committed. And they must have got really irritated with me sitting at the back of the class, shoving my hand up to answer every single question and ask a
So,
fair few as well. I think I was a complete pain in the arse, to be honest.
no, I doubt it. I bet you contributed loads. I mean, because all that experience. So you go back to college, you
Yep.
qualify, then you have to look for a training contract, presumably.
That's right. 2 years training contract. Yeah.
And
Once you've done,
how was
yeah.
that process to get the training
Completely
contract?
different to how it is now. No Watson Glaser test, no psychometric assessment, no group assessment. Frankly, I just picked 3 or 4 firms in Bristol that I'd kind of come across that looked medium-sized, and went in and sat on the opposite side of a desk to a partner. Usually the air was thick with cigar smoke or pipe smoke, because
That's
those were the
unimaginable.
days, and had a chat really. Um, and I think my maturity and the fact that I'd run a business helped actually. And I was made offers, and I joined a firm called Trumps, which turned into TLT whilst I
Okay.
was there.
And
Um,
then so did that involve sort of different seats in different legal areas? Like
yes, I mean, from memory, I think it was a 4-seat training contract that I had. The training contract lasts for 2 years.
that's still the norm,
Um,
isn't it? Two years, 4 seats. Is that still standard?
Burgess Salmon is a 6-seat firm. So
Okay.
yeah, which again attracts a lot of people because they get more exposure to different areas. I mean, as a training principal, as a supervisor, after 4 months, your trainee's just getting good and then they go. So
Yeah.
it's six and one, half dozen the other. But yes, I think I did 6 months, 4 seats. Yeah.
And is that where you first came across family law?
It was. They were grooming me, and I use that word advisedly, to be a tax lawyer, actually. Um, Exceptionally, they'd sent me on residential courses that cost quite a lot. And I was very nearly on the verge of signing up to be a tax lawyer. And then my last seat came along, which was family. Um, and I thought, oh, actually, this has got quite a lot going for it. And the partner that I was articled to, because we did call it articles in those days, went on maternity leave. And the firm got a locum in who lasted 2 days. So it was a bit like my first work experience. The
Jeez, yeah.
locum didn't come back, and the partner said, sit there, run this caseload. And I did. And when I next looked up, they were going, do you want a job? And I was going, oh, okay. So
Well,
yeah,
that's really being thrown in the deep end.
I loved it again because it was real work. I mean,
Yeah.
as a trainee, you kind of had to sit there thinking, I could do that. Okay, give me a go. Come on, come on. But yeah, no, I just got completely stuck in.
And this was straight into, so is this straight into divorcing couples, representing one of them
Yeah, absolutely.
on the
Yeah,
settlement?
yeah, 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 yeah. Lots and lots of court work in those days. Trump's had a partly legal aid practice, partly kind of not exactly high net worth because we didn't use words like that 30 years ago.
It was rich
But
people.
yeah, so it was a mixed practice. And a partner called David Woodward, who sadly died earlier this year, who had a very good reputation as being the best effectively in the Southwest, and had acted for people like Phil Collins and all sorts of, yeah. He was the go-to guy. So I was lucky to watch and learn from him.
Has the league has family law changed in respect of what you were saying about how you settle 90% of separations now? Was it always like that, or did more cases go end up in court back in the day?
I think it's true to say that the more money there is, generally, the easier it is to settle. You've got more options, you've got more possibilities to create something.
Yeah, that
And when I started out, especially the legal aid cases, there really wasn't much to go around, and then it's quite difficult. There also really wasn't the focus then on mediation. You didn't have the same options in terms of out of court dispute resolution. Arbitration wasn't even a thing. Private financial dispute resolution appointments, which we do all the time now,
yeah.
bypassing the court system, simply didn't exist. Um, it was set up to be more litigious. The court process now has changed. It's evolved over time.
Yeah.
So people went to law more quickly, especially if you didn't really know what you were doing and you had a big caseload you just issued and went off and said to the judge, what do you think we should do?
So with sort of when there's less assets involved and it goes to court maybe more often. Is that simply because people look at the settlement and they just simply conclude this is insufficient? I can't live on this. So do they feel compelled to fight for more, even though they're
Well,
necessarily?
you're both chewing over the same bone. If there are two bones, then you can kind of whittle them into a similar size, can't you, and give one each. But if there's only one bone, then everybody's going to scrap over it. Was kind of,
Yeah.
yeah. But also there was a lot more domestic violence cases, injunctions, non-molestation orders, lots of disputes about children. My practice has kind of evolved over the years away from that type of thing. It was at TLT that I decided that I wanted to differentiate myself and started networking with accountants and corporate lawyers because I saw there was a gap. I mean, for a long time, I went to networking and drinks parties, and I was the only woman there. I mean, it was just a sea of dark suits. And I worked closely with the insolvency, turnaround, and corporate teams
Hmm.
who were excellent at that firm because I wanted to understand businesses. I wanted to act for businessmen, and I wanted cases which had complexity.
And is
Um,
that because you were increasingly getting cases where there were business assets that needed to be incorporated? It
It was a
wasn't
bit
sim
six of one and half a dozen the other. I said I'm a business specialist,
Yeah.
and learned on the job, and people brought me cases with business interests. So yeah, I have found that actually as I've gone through my career, if you say you do something, and then cross your fingers and read a book, the work will come. I mean, I first held myself out as a cohabitation specialist because not many solicitors understand how different the law is when couples live together compared with marriage. And I noticed that they were cocking it up left, right, and centre. So I, just wrote a spiel on the website saying I specialise in cohabitation, and then did, then handed that practice over and thought, no, businesses actually are really interesting.
Sounds
Um,
like you've really had a hand in deciding what you do and where you go, into not just in terms of firm, but in terms of what type of legal work you're doing. Is that fair?
yes, it is fair. I've deliberately, I mean, sometimes you look back and think, gosh, that was more deliberate than I thought. Um, but for example, when I joined Irwin Mitchell with a brief to set up a family team there in Bristol, the firm is very, very famous for its personal injury practice. It's huge, it's renowned. Um, and because the corporate team wasn't as developed, certainly in the Bristol office, and I didn't have the same kind of referrals and
Mm.
running mates, again, I decided that I would educate myself, and I now have a speciality in acting for people who lack capacity after a brain injury, um, and dealing with huge personal injury trusts because the family lawyers simply weren't doing it, and it was scaring them, and they didn't know what it was. So yeah, I've deliberately looked for opportunities, and I've been fortunate to find them and
It's
work with
funny,
them.
isn't that Irwin Mitchell? All the people I know at Irwin Mitchell are family lawyers, pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
So
Well, there is a big team there now. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Nationally, there's a big team, but there is a very large team in Bristol. There wasn't one at all. I was the only one. I left TLT with my secretary and a
there's quite
van
a lot.
load of files.
There's a lot of entrepreneurial threads going through this sort of this conversation and the stuff you've done, which is not, maybe this is me not knowing the legal sector as well, but
Hmm.
it's not something that springs to mind immediately when I think of law and sort of entrepreneurialism, but this very much sounds it. Um, did that
Law
just
is a
come
business.
naturally, or
Law is a business. And maybe it does to me, yes, but family lawyers in particular build their own practices based on their personalities. I I'm useless without my following. That's why Burgess Salmon wanted me, because I've got connections in the region from working hard over the years. But yes, I've built up a business, which is the business of giving legal advice. And I've been fortunate to choose the frameworks within which I've done that.
mm,
To a
so,
certain extent. I mean, obviously, they wanted me too.
something that we notice at the events we run, and it's an impression that I get that often with law, solicitors they'll be trained, they'll start the job, and they'll, over those first 5 to 8, 9, 10 years of their career, they basically become subject matter experts, proficient at practicing in the area that they are. And then at some point, they'll start to eye up promotion or advancement in the firm, or particularly heading for partnership. And often
Yeah.
firms will turn around and say, well, where are your clients coming from and where's the business coming from? And I think for some, that can be a bit of a surprising moment, because it's
Mm.
not
Yeah.
being necessarily ingrained in the day job for those first 5, 6, 7 years post qualification. Is that accurate, or is that
It depends
changed?
who your team leader is. I mean,
Okay.
certainly the teams I work with from day one, there's an understanding that actually, we are building a practice, we are networking, we are ambassadors for the firm and for family law. And your contact book needs to be as strong as it possibly can. But I think you might be right in other firms where business development is deemed to be the province of the partners
Yeah.
and the juniors never get involved. And I've heard juniors say, well, I'm not taken to anything. I don't go to anything. And even if I did, what would I say? They only want to talk to the partners, which is a load of rubbish.
Yeah, it's not the case.
Everybody's got something to say, you know?
We do
Um,
we do get the odd email or call from juniors that are maybe going to attend an event,
mm,
and they sometimes have got this real fear of what they're going to be asked at a networking event. And I just,
yes, yeah.
I mean, you'll know, but I'll reassure them that they will not be asked
Yeah,
any work
absolutely.
questions.
I've done networking training. I've set up dummy drinks parties because it's really quite daunting to walk into a room of strangers, attach yourself to a group of people who look like they've known each other for 20 years, but in fact met 10 minutes ago, who were nattering away and go, hello, I'm Alison, I do divorces. And they go, yeah, whatevs, yeah. Anyway, and I said to Charlie, and then we went to the rugby, and I went, oh God, I hate me. Oh my God, I'll go and try and talk to that potted palm. And I go and talk to the potted palm, and I say to her, hello, have you come here often? It's hard work. It really
Yeah,
is. And it's a good idea to prepare 2 or 3 kind of topics. It's a good idea, for example, to have some words and phrases about yourself, your practice, and your firm. And I am constantly giving juniors tips and phrases and, support to be able to go and do those things.
it. I mean, you're 100% right. That experience of going to a room and seeing lots of people
Mm,
talking, and they look like they are best friends and they've known each other
yeah,
forever. And you're right,
yeah,
they may have just
yeah,
met and be
yeah,
doing the hi, I'm X, I work at Y.
yeah, yeah.
It's one of the reasons actually at our events, really early on, we weren't sure whether we were going to do the table, because we do table plans at all of our
I
events.
know. I think it's
And
brilliant moving
and
things
we
around.
asked people
Yeah.
early on, because we were at the start, we were a bit worried, is it a bit formal, is it a bit stuffy? And it was a universal response from absolutely everyone. They were like, no, please,
Mm,
I
mm.
liked being told where to go. And they were saying our worst nightmare is just grab a table with someone and sort of figure it out.
And
People
you
actually
think there's
much
one
prefer.
space there, and then they say, no, I'm saving that for my friend actually. And you, oh God, yeah. And then you go and then you end up next to the bloke on the end who's in insurance and really doesn't have anything to say. No,
They
not at your gigs, obviously, but yeah.
obviously.
No, I think that the moving round between courses or wine tastings is inspired.
Oh,
It
thanks.
keeps people on their toes. You end up talking to somebody that otherwise you would completely have, not realized was there. And you get the complete range. And it's not always something that is going to, lead immediately to a massive, great job. Of course it's not. It's not like that. I think, if I may say so, that networking is like minestrone. It's on a complete simmer, and every now and again, your bit of carrot comes to the top. And sometimes you stir the minestrone, which means the carrot is swirling around a bit, and you get, because you've actually put some effort into it, written an article, done a podcast, or, been to lots and lots of drinks parties. But it's minestrone. It really is. It's on a slow simmer. And I've had approaches from people who say, I met a bloke in a pub 20 years ago when I was on holiday, and he used you for his divorce, and he said
Oh,
you were
wow.
brilliant. And I filed that away, and I think my marriage is on the rocks. Can I come and see you? And I think, blimey,
It does happen. The amount of
it
times that
does.
we get people on, so in the financial advice side, that they make contact about something, and they might disappear for a couple of years, and
Yeah,
then but
yeah,
they haven't
yeah.
forgotten. It's just life is
No,
busy. They've
no,
got
exactly.
a busy career, families, and then a couple of years later, or sometimes more, they come back and they're like, remember that thing that we were going to do? And I was like, what, the thing 3 years ago? They're like, yeah, that. Can we do that now? I'm like, yeah, yeah, sure, let's do
Yeah,
it.
absolutely. I mean, there are some people, mostly women, at the risk of generalizing, who I have seen once a year for 8 years, who haven't quite decided what they want to do, and
Wow.
um, and sometimes husband dies and that's it, and I never see them again.
Problem
Sometimes
solved.
it all works exactly, problem solved or whatever. But also, it's one of the reasons why I think it's so important to be friendly, confident, and cheerful, whoever you are speaking to. You never know, do you, what impression you're getting, um, and giving. And also, when people phone, and if they're not quite right for me, because it's not complicated enough, or it would simply not be cost effective, I always take care to talk to them and do the referral myself and pass them on and make sure they're comfortable and go somewhere. Because I mean, I remember refusing to act for the wife of somebody whom I was at law school. And he was so grateful that I didn't,
Mm.
that he now sends me every single one of his friends, and he's one of the best connected guys, and one of the most successful businessmen I know. And it was that simple thing of me saying, I don't feel quite right. When his wife came to see me many, many, many years ago, when he was divorced, when he was younger. And
Yeah,
he's really
that would have been a really difficult position to be in
well, I
if you
didn't
hadn't have.
know him very well, but I just didn't feel quite right about it.
Yeah,
And if you don't feel quite right about it, generally you should trust your gut.
yeah. That I
Some
mean that
people,
applies.
some people fudge conflicts and say, oh, we can be pragmatic about this, we can set up information barriers. My experience is it's rarely worth it.
Yeah,
There's enough work out there without having to,
we
leap
don't.
through
It's
hoops.
slightly different for us because we can often retain each part of a couple. So
Yes.
if a couple
Yeah.
divorces, we can retain both, but the reason is because we're often not too involved in the separation. So
Yes.
they
Yeah.
often will tell us it's happening. We'll get requests, like factual requests, send us valuations,
Mm,
send us statements, maybe some affordability on something, but it's very much just a factual, here is this. We're certainly not advising, and we don't get into the weeds of it. So we can and do retain both clients
yeah.
sometimes. And,
Yeah.
and it,
Yeah.
I've not had any issues with it so far. There was one case I couldn't, but it was similar to yours in just that I had a personal connection to one of them. And I just like,
Yeah. 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 And sometimes that is going to happen. And the longer I keep doing this job, the more people I know. So, almost the harder it gets. One of the things that used to happen, I don't think it's happened recently, was being kind of conflicted out. That particularly actually Welsh businessmen would come across the bridge, have a meeting, pay for it. I'd set up a file, and then I'd never hear from them again. And I realized that what they were doing was making sure that their wives couldn't come and see me
oh,
because I had
okay,
a reputation for being fierce and good and, would rip their businesses apart and get values and things.
smart
They
guys.
were going, you can't go. No, sorry. But hey, that's quite flattering in a
And
way.
is that sufficient to be conflicted out? A single introductory meeting where you're not actually going to be providing the core service on the separation, is that sufficient just to
Yes,
say,
it generally is. I mean, to be honest, it doesn't take much. Just taking some information might not, but if you're actually having a meeting,
yeah,
then frankly, you get bloody good value from me. You get advice, you get strategy, you get
mm,
everything.
yeah, okay, that makes more
It's not
sense, I
just a
guess.
chat and a biscuit.
Yeah.
So yes, it is enough.
Quick question on the interaction with other private client professionals. So obviously our networking group is all about, connecting all of us, because when
Yeah.
I when I first started in the sort of financial advice world, I found that I was always at events with other financial advisors, which is all good, but
Yeah.
only at events with financial advisors. And I was like, there's all these other adjacent sectors where we have overlapping responsibilities, particularly from what I do with maybe tax advisors or people who do tax
Yes.
returns. And I was like, why am I not meeting them anywhere? And part of the reason we created Private Client Network was to try and facilitate that. What's your touch points with other private client advisors? When does it happen from your point of view,
Um,
aside
to
from
be honest,
networking events?
well, that actually is kind of how it happens. We get a lot of approaches, and it took quite a lot of my career to kind of, if I may say so, weed out. I mean, I could have had wall-to-wall coffees with financial advisors in the old days,
Yeah,
of all sorts of pedigree, from people who wore white socks and slightly too short trousers who were retired police officers who really didn't have a clue,
yeah.
to really sophisticated, and obviously now regulations, rules have changed, and far less commission, which I never kind of worked with anyway, and clients didn't like.
Mm.
But my touch points are, um, as I said at the outset, generally during the life of advising. So if, for example, I am talking to a businessman about sharing his pension, maybe raising some money against his shares, he might have given his wife shares, I want him to understand what that means. I want him to go to somebody who speaks his language. I want him to be able to talk about how he can build his pension back up if he shares it. I want him to understand the value of what he's sharing compared with, the pounds, shillings, and pence. I want him to talk about how his business is going to cope if actually he does borrow, if he can borrow. So I want fairly high level advice for them during us working together and doing the kind of exploring.
Yeah.
Quite often for a wife, and again, it's generalizing, but it tends to be that they may not have been the ones who have set budgets and things like that. And if you're trying to get a clean break, then they will need to understand how a large fund can be invested to generate income for the rest of their lives, how to manage that, the cash flow forecasting that we were talking about
Yeah.
when we chatted. But also, there are lots of people who say, I absolutely must stay in the house. I must stay in the family home.
Yeah. I think
It's
that must come up
security.
often.
Yeah, of course, because if your life's been ripped apart, and you're not really sure, you're feeling economically vulnerable, um, very unsure, financially not very sophisticated, staying in a property where you're comfortable is obvious, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that might not be the best outcome if you're offsetting that against a share of a significant pension down the line.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a hard
and
one to convey that the
yeah,
value of a house and a property in your home is so apparent and in your face and emotional, and the value
it's
of
the emotional security, the sentimentality of, well, this is where the children are born,
yeah.
and I want the children to be able to come back here with their children and their partners. Yeah, okay, but you're going to be poor. Um,
It's really
yeah,
it's really difficult that when someone, I think I've said this on previous podcasts, but when someone receives a large amount of money, be it from a divorce settlement or a bereavement or something, and they're not used to dealing with it, it can be quite a jarring experience. And it's
yeah,
very different from our point of view to dealing with the person who earned it, whoever that is, because typically they earned it quite slowly. They accumulated wealth over time. They got used
mm,
to the investing process. They got used to
yeah, yeah,
different
yeah, yeah,
tax
yeah,
wrappers and tax mitigation strategies slowly, easily over years and years and years and years. So when the sums become large, they're so used to that journey, the ups and downs of investment markets, it doesn't phase them particularly. But to come at it cold with a large sum of money, it can be, yeah, it can be quite a jarring experience. So you've got to be, from our point of view, we find you've got to be particularly attentive,
yeah,
patient.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I remember the very, very first big money case that I did. The wife thought that her husband ran a fruit stall at Bristol Market.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, and she'd always shopped at Oxfam, bought clothes for the kids there, made sausage and lentil casserole go around 3 times. Lovely, lovely woman. Catholic, brought up lots and lots of kids, homemaker, supported him when he went off every morning to the banana stall. It turned out that he was actually a major importer. And had a massive stake in Fifes, who you
Oh,
probably know are the biggest bananas in the world, effectively. And he had shed loads of money. So
wow.
she ended up being the Coots used to call it the sudden wealth team.
Yeah.
People who win the lottery, people who inherit, or wives who have settlements on divorce. But there she was with a massive settlement. And I was pretty junior at that time, and I only knew one financial advisor that one of the partners at work had introduced me to because he was doing the firm's pension or something for the partners.
Mm.
So I sent her along, and he was just the worst person.
Oh
He,
God.
you know,
Oh
he
no.
he wouldn't let her spend her own money. He was patronizing. He didn't explain anything. He kept patting her on the head. And she
Oh
rang me
geez.
one day and said, I just want to take the grandkids on holiday. And he says, oh, I shouldn't, and I shouldn't do this and whatever. And I found her somebody else because by then I was a bit more sophisticated. But he hadn't grown with her. you know, and she had a lot of money. She wanted to do philanthropic things. She wanted to buy properties in the country and have nice holidays. And yeah, why the hell not?
Well, I think you
So,
did her a very good service because, yeah, that I mean, he's the antithesis of everything you should be doing as an advisor,
exactly. But I
and
didn't know any better because he was the only one. I mean, I think I was about 6 months qualified at that
yeah,
point.
no, you
Um,
did. It was great that you moved, and the industry's, to be honest, our industry is kind of unrecognizable in many years from what it was
oh,
20 years
isn't it?
ago.
Absolutely. Light years. Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
emphasis on the person and the people is I think much larger. I mean, probably with the good ones it always was, but there's
Yeah.
structural changes that have mean
Exactly. Structural changes have made a difference. And it's like I said to you, I don't care about your technical expertise. I don't care what
what?
investment. I really, I mean, I take it for granted, is what
No,
I'm
I know, I
saying.
know, I know.
And I want to refer on the basis of personality. I want
Mm,
to refer on the basis of somebody that the person that I've worked with very closely over 9 months, 12 months will feel comfortable with.
yeah,
Um, and that's why it's quite nice to have joint meetings at an early stage and say, well, let's have a look at this. You know, if you do stay in the house, then what might it look like in 5 years' time, 10 years' time? You know, how do you want to live your life? Do you want to travel? And I kind of do a bit of that, but you do it so much better.
oh well, I think
So,
we just
you know,
we've all got complementary skill sets to bring to bear, hopefully.
mm, mm.
And yeah, and part of it get better service for our clients. I'm aware I've taken up a lot of your time, so one final question: if there's someone listening who is working their way up in a law firm and do want to progress and want to make partner, for example, what advice, what do they need to know that they might not know?
Being a partner is not the be all and end all. Don't just go for the badge for the sake of it. Being involved in managing a law firm is really rewarding.
Mm,
Go for it. If you're talking about family law, then that's a hell of a privilege to be a family lawyer. You need to know about tax, corporate vehicles, onshore structures, offshore structures, trusts. You know, you need to understand land law thoroughly. And we are, when all is said and done, asset managers. We are asset protectors.
mm.
I don't know, again, I said to you when we were chatting on the phone, it's been prenup season. We do a huge amount of asset protection, pre-thinking to try to prevent, you know, expensive court battles. That doesn't answer your question, I know, but it's a plug for family law that I was desperate to make.
That's all right.
Because I want people to qualify into it and understand what a privilege it can be, especially when you're dealing with it at the top of the market, high net worth, really sophisticated strategies for financial outcomes. Being a partner, be polite, be friendly, be cheerful. Never forget that, you know, the people that you are talking to on the way up may well, yeah, be the ones that actually make decisions about your future and your career. So yeah, be polite, be cheerful, be accessible, work hard, but don't work too hard because that actually gets quite boring.
You
Um,
know, it's funny.
have
It's
life.
all that's all the personal side of progression that isn't. I mean, we take the hard work and doing a good job. That's sort of taken as a given, but
Yeah.
it is, and I think sometimes people, especially if you're a particularly academic type and hard work was been the method of your progress sort of in
Yes.
earlier
Yeah.
parts of your life, it's
Yeah.
sometimes a bit hard to think, actually, yes, that is super important, but there's maybe a little interpersonal stuff that I need to work on. And I
People
think
buy
that goes
people.
across careers, actually.
Yeah. People buy people. I refer to people. I don't refer to technical specialists, you know, except in very limited circumstances. So yeah, people buy people and have a good business plan. Think about where your work comes from, where you want it to come from, what's realistic. You know, the sorts of people that you enjoy working with. Think about the sorts of things you enjoy doing. Do you like writing articles? Write them. Do you
Mm.
like doing public speaking? Fantastic. Get a name for doing that. Are you good at drinks parties? No, not really. Fine. Write the article instead.
Yeah, I
Do
think
what
that's
fits. Do what comes naturally, basically, because otherwise you'll be miserable and it will show. You will just look a bit awkward and you'll be the one talking to the potted palm like I usually am.
oh, I think that's really good advice. Alison, look, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so
It's
much
been a
for coming
pleasure. It's
on.
nice to talk to you because usually it's just a fleeting and you're running off and organising and
Oh, I
sorting
know.
out all your fabulous events. I think they really are fabulous. I think you and Simon do a sterling job, honestly.
Oh,
They're
that's
great for
really kind
juniors,
of.
seniors alike. So don't stop.
Cool. Well, hopefully our next round of events is October, November. So hopefully see you at one of those.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Charlie.
Cheers. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.